So actually, let's stick on Chelsea for a sec. When I said they're relatively healthy, they're basically healthy apart from Mateo Kovacic. So they're basically just by default infinitely more healthy than we are. And but it is interesting that Kovacic missing is to me, I could be wrong. To me, it's a big one, big absence to have, a presence to be missing because, and Real Madrid's people who they're missing, it's incredibly significant. Like, we'll get to it. Ferland Mendy not being there is a huge loss, and others. But Kovacic brings something unique to Chelsea in that he's probably their best ball carrier. I mean, Mason Mount can do quite a bit too, but Kovacic is definitely a guy who can get you from point A to point B and build up the transition to help Jorginho and Kante. How much do you think they'll miss him, or do you think the double pivot of Kante and Jorginho, assuming that they go that route, can do the job just fine?
So I like Kante, but when it comes to ability to break line, how do I put it? Kovacic is one of the most consistent midfield line breakers in world football. It's his main thing. Kante can have really good games doing this. For example, he did things quite well against Manchester City, so he could have a good game against Real Madrid too, but it's more inconsistent. It's a bit of a coin toss whether he will have a great game with the ball or not. That's the main thing. So it's like Kante could have a really good game carrying the ball or not. So it's a bit. I find it a bit hard to predict, but it's interesting because it will depend a lot on how much Real Madrid press. Like if for some crazy reason Zidane decides to press a lot with this very tired group of players. In that situation, Kovacic's impact could have been massive. In this situation, I think it's going to punish them less. Like if Real Madrid choose to defend deeper, that's kind of Kovacic's disadvantage. Like when it comes to breaking down, and again, it's one of the reasons Chelsea have struggled to break down deep blocks for a while, because really they don't really have too many players that read those situations too well. Like maybe Mount is the best at reading those situations, but Kovacic struggles in that. And so if Real Madrid decides to defend deeper, maybe his impact won't be felt that much. But it will depend a lot on basically on how Kante is feeling that night. Because if he's in good shape, he can actually do a pretty good job with the ball.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. And I think the fatigue in itself is part of the reason why a lot of people think that this might be boring, because I don't know how much either team will press. And if we see them press, it's certainly not going to be for a full 90 minutes the way Ajax and Manchester City basically did in the last 2 years. But with Real Madrid, I kind of worry if they start defending deep a little bit, because I'm not sure that's the best way to fight fatigue, if you know what I mean. Like when you start chasing the ball, like mentally, physically, I think that's so draining because, look, we've seen it against Liverpool and Barcelona, despite winning that week from hell and coming out on the other side successfully. It was really uncomfortable against Barca at the end, and it was pretty uncomfortable against Liverpool too for large stretches because they were just trying to tread water, get the ball out. And I think Real Madrid will do better if they're in control. Can they be controlled without the ball? Yes, but it will require a lot of good sharp passing and a lot of good outlets from Vinicius. So actually, and it's on the table. Like Kroos and Modric, I trust them with all my heart in those situations, and I do trust Vinicius to get into good spots, and I do trust Benzema too. But they will have to be really good in transition to catch Chelsea. I also, a lot has been made, Jose, about Chelsea's quote-unquote physicality. I think that's pretty real. What I saw against Atletico, for example, was things like Rudiger throwing Marcos Llorente, who was a physical specimen, off the ball like he wasn't even there. And we all know what N'Golo Kante can do and all that stuff. How much of that do you think Real Madrid should be worried about, or do you feel pretty confident that Real Madrid can combat that physicality?
The thing is that I see. I'm not sure how big of a factor physicality will be in this because I kind of expect a slow paced game. So it's even if Chelsea were better physically, it's not going to be a constant come and go. Like both managers are afraid of that kind of situation and they will try, and both of them will be trying to exert control over the game and to slow down the game. So maybe physicality won't be that big of a factor. And then uh, the the biggest situations where it could be a factor is in fast attack situations. And in that regard, as I said before, I think Real Madrid's defensive line is pretty well matched up against Chelsea's attack. So I am not so worried about the physicality aspect for now. Not trying to think about it. And in the end, yeah, our attack, it is true, though, that Real Madrid's attack, other than Vinicius, should try to be a more intellectual rather than physical challenge for Chelsea. Because, yeah, other than Vinicius, they would be the Real Madrid wouldn't be at an advantage. Real Madrid's attack wouldn't be at an advantage physically.
So you brought up Real Madrid's defense quite a few times. They are one of the best defensive teams in the world. When I saw the Ferland Mendy news today, my heart sank a little bit because he's been so important for the team, and especially in big games. And he's such a trustworthy defender, reliable defender. Whether you want to talk about physicality or transition defense, he's your guy. He is a wall. He's just so reliable back there. Not having him there doesn't make this task impossible, but it makes it complicated. And I wonder, what do you think the solution is? So the options basically are 3